How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good. All right. Welcome to ColorCode's conference. My name is Miguel. I'm a designer educator working on brand marketing at Figma. Has anybody here heard of Figma before? Yes. All right. Cool. Well, I'm in good company. So my first job was in the city of Buffalo. I worked for Mayor Masiello's office back in 1998. That is my ID card. And yes, in the late 90s, they had us walk around with our social security number on our badges that we had to walk around with City Hall. Yes. Who would believe that thing, right? So at first I worked in data processing, then I worked in the mayor's office. They entrusted the website to a 16-year-old. I was like designing and making this whole thing. All right, I was mildly internet famous for drawing on coffee cups in 2014. And I was on a morning show in Sacramento for it. So this is me, I was drawing on coffee cups. I promise this is important at some point. So I've been at Figma since 2021. Figma, you could do a lot of things in Figma. You could present, you could design, you can now animate, you can make shaders, you can make code, you can create AI, stuff with AI. So I sit between designer advocacy and Figma for education. So that role in the middle means I work in the community, but I also work internally. I work with product teams internally. And my new role-ish is I'm a creative lead on product storytelling. So I work on a lot of launches. So I make a lot of content. So if you follow me on Instagram or if you follow Figma's socials, you probably see me doing demos and tutorials. This is me in my home office in Rochester, New York. I work on a lot of these launches. If anybody's ever seen the Little Big Updates where we'll drop like 40 GIFs, I made every single one of those. So what's interesting about this is I work really closely with the product teams and basically there's a little gatekeeper on whether or not something can ship if it's like good enough. But that helped me build relationships within the company and kind of like level up my influence in the types of projects that I get to work on. So I also make launch videos for new features. I mentioned the creative lead. So if you've seen any of our like last launch videos, I make these with screen recordings. So what I do is I have a 5K monitor and I manage screen recordings and I kind of make these adjustments and tell the stories in kind of like interesting ways. So all of these are like in product. This isn't motion graphics. We have different tiers for our launches. We have a team that does do motion graphics, but oftentimes they need something like this done in a day or like two, or you know, they're like, hey Miggy, can you just make one of these videos? This also gave me the opportunity to create a system for making billboards at a Times Square scale. So they came to me and they were like, hey, we bought all this ad space in Times Square. It needs to go up in like 2 weeks. We want to have these partnership with customers. And we don't know what we really want to put up there. So I'll work with the brand team. And I actually developed a system for screen recording. And at the time, we had these windows that can kind of sit in either end. So I figured out the perfect scale. So these are genuine screen recordings in product that we made at building scale. So these are the kind of problems that I like to get in my hands dirty with and like to solve. Oh, and I was on Thai National News for it. So here, like 11 million followers on this freaking account. And this is me pretending like I'm drawing on the billboard. I also made this music too, because you know I have no rights. But see, I pretend like I'm drawing it and like it's like live on the billboard there. So this presentation is about intentionality and process. It's called prototyping with play. I usually kind of give that moniker to some of my talks when I don't know what I'm really going to talk about until, you know, I come to talk about it. But really, you know, prototypes are made to understand things more deeply, to solve problems. To me, everything is a prototype. It's all about curiosity, exploration, and play. So oftentimes I like to talk about my level of curiosity, right? When I think about projects, it's that I usually question things, right? So I usually think about, this is one of my curiosities, and this is years old, and actually people have since copied my presentation and put it online. But why are phones and calculators numbered differently? If you take a look at the phone layout and look at the calculator layout, right? Phones, top left to bottom right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Calculators, bottom left to top right. And the answer is that when Bell Labs is going from the rotary to the touch tone phone, they needed to think of like a new interface, literal digital interface, from switching from the rotary standard to touchtone. They were no longer burdened by the constraints of the physical mechanism of that device, right? So what they did was they brought in user testing, because the engineers can figure out exactly how it should be. Is it going to be a row of 2? Is it going to be, just mirroring the calculator exactly? So what they did was they did these user studies, and people were more comfortable, at least in Western culture, with 1, 2, 3 on the top. And the reason is, it was more comfortable for the way that we recall, right? So we're not calculating, right? We're not performing this sort of like logical math. We're sort of recall and accuracy. So it's more like reading, right? So there actually was a discernible difference, and folks found this much more ergonomic. They found this much easier for the functions that they were performing. So if they were to have mirrored the calculator, it would have been a lot more difficult for people to kind of manage in the phones in an era where we had to recall and type in those numbers manually, right, with the constraints that they had. Calculators themselves were also based off of mechanical constraints, having the larger numbers being further away and the smaller numbers being closer due to the physical mechanisms that were inside. So you can see sort of different layouts over time. That interface developed over time, initially based off of constraints, and then kind of developed in a way that we all kind of know and sometimes use. So in the absence of physical constraints, we often need to identify them and define them ourselves. So what I think about is, I'm in product design, right? And some of y'all are in product marketing, some of y'all are in websites. And so I will look at our interfaces now with the same kind of curiosity, and I like to dissect what people are thinking and as they're doing. So when we think about going from devices that have mechanical constraints to ones that no longer have those constraints, when we start thinking about this phone device where we could put anything on that screen that we want, we have to define our own, right? So if you take a look at the mechanical alarm clock, it was a physical mechanism that you had to wind up, and then it would make a noise at some point in the future, right? That's what it did. Now, when we first started bringing them over to our phones, we're like, okay, we could do that in infinitive. How many of y'all do this? Where, like, I did this morning, where I had like a 655, 657, 658, right? And when you're thinking about it in those terms, you could do more, but when you define constraints, when you try to solve a better problem, you're gonna come up with better solutions, right? And this is really relevant now in this age of AI, where technically you can build almost anything. So when you redefine the problem, and you're, instead of solving the problem of setting an alarm so at some point in the future you wake up and you take a look at the next larger context, and it's like, okay, how do you visualize sleep? How many people have been in that situation where you have a presentation the next morning, you're up very late, and you're counting on your fingers? All right, if I go to sleep now, you're bargaining with yourself. I can get 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours of sleep. Anybody's been there? Anybody? I've been there. I was there last night. And so when you're in that scenario, maybe there's a better way. So if you create an interface, right, no longer bound by the physical constraints of the alarm clock, you can actually generate and design an interface with a better problem to solve that helps visualize a solution. So here, this is one of Apple's original designs, where you're using this interface to actually see how much sleep you're getting, and then over time, maybe you can result in a better sleep habit. So thinking about the problems, thinking about it contextually, in inventing your own constraints. And this is all about intent, right? What are you intending to do? So design without intentionality is not design at all. So design requires to be intentional about all aspects, which requires diligent exploration and a lot of information gathering. Making something because it was cool or because it's what the project manager wanted is not design at all. So exploration. One of the first opportunities that I had when I joined Figma, we were working on a new tool then called it is called FigJam. I was gonna say we called it FigJam. You don't want to say FigJam in Australia, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows that. Look it up. And actually, funny story with a CEO. Actually, I can't mention the name of that company. We gave him a preview, and we're like, "Hey, we got FigJam," and then he was like, "Oh, you're gonna want that URL," and we're like, "Oh yeah, we're working on it behind the scenes," and he's like, "I'll tell you what, you're not gonna get it because I own it." And this, jerk of a CEO is like, you're never, it's just sitting on this URL forever, so we're never gonna have figjam.com. And the reason he has figjam.com is for that naughty notion that I mentioned earlier. It's a naughty acronym. So, as I mentioned, designing for FigJam, designing for delight on a whiteboard. I was on a sprint, and the way that we framed this sprint was we wanted to design for delight, but our approach was to think about the tweet that somebody would share out after they got to experience the tool, right? So we were like saying, oh, I just found out I could drag my avatar as a voting sticker, right? Whoa, holding down the right click opens this menu. When you see your PM in the file at 2 a.m., you're waving, right? We started from we're trying to manifest, the outcomes that we want. We wanted folks to share things online. We saw that when we implemented features in Figma design, people would discover them, they would kind of share this moment online, and it would have this sort of like bottoms up adoption of like, oh, you could do this, you could do that. And that really worked well for us. So we figured in designing for delight, or designing these delighters within the product, can have a similar effect, and that's where we started. So these are all screen captures from that initial one. I'm gonna highlight this right here. Whoa, just realize that when you put your cursor over someone else's, you can high five them. This is a prototype that I then got tasked with. The way that I made this prototype, I initially started in Figma, but I actually jumped into After Effects, and I animated, like what might that look like? So I had, this is my first little animation. Then I was like, okay, what does the discovery process look like for the hands? I started thinking about, what does the actual high five look like in FigJam? So, we would then kind of review this in the sprint. We had about a day from the beginning to the end of the day of like what those explorations look like, and those prototypes could be anything. So, like I said, I had this tendency to animate, that's where I went. So these are some of the designers' designs. Once we got the green light to work on this, you can see the intent behind it. It's so much more than just say, hey, have two hands clap, right? It's thinking about that entire experience. What is the entry point? What is hands up mode? What is the behavior like, right? We even begin to deconstruct, like what are the angles for that hand movement, right? What is the start? What is the reaction? How do you exit? What is the pivot point for that hand? These are all intentional decisions that are made as part of the product to then further elicit that response to make it nice. And this is my first high five. This was with my manager. I was like really excited when we make it. There's these like little bars that kind of show up. That's an animated SVG. It's the one piece of code that I actually have committed in like Figma's code base. Well, at the time, but I was like really proud that I got to animate that. So we manifested our desired outcomes. When we released it, and when FigJam high fives were available, people were sharing out. It's magical watching people's faces when they first discovered the high five feature in Figma Design, right? We would see people share, these sort of responses and kind of share them internally. And did you know you can give a high five in FigJam? So, all that said, Figma is my favorite playground, right? Like, I live in it, I work in it. And I use it as a problem-solving tool more often than not. I got to work closely with some new releases, so Figma Motion, shaders, and tools. I've been extremely head down on them. Now I'm not at Figma as a product designer, but I kind of live in Figma as sort of like a Figma enthusiast at Figma. So teams usually want me very close in testing and iterating with their products. Sometimes, even now, like we have this prototyping playground with Cursor. I can't really show that right now, but like they'll give me a tool and I'll say, all right, I want this. And instead of just asking for it, sometimes I'll prompt it in the Cursor and I'll show them what I mean to get look and feel. But working really closely with these teams, I actually only did that like once or twice. I'm not trying to say like I'm making all of these cool products, but I'm usually telling them exactly what I want, and then they show it to me and I'm like, that's not what I want. I want it to feel like this. And I want to show you the result of some of that work. So I'm going to walk through this file that I have right here. Anybody watch Config? Config is our conference, no? Does anybody know that we now have a motion tool in Figma? All right, cool. I'm going to walk you through some of the motion stuff. I'm like really excited about it. All right, so let me just hop out of here. And we're gonna hop into here. And so we're just gonna be like right in Figma. So I'm gonna talk about this, and this is something that you can use today. It's in Figma. It's actually in all it's in all the plans, right? It's not gated out of the bat. And I want to talk about what it does and some of the like mantra behind it, so you can kind of see where we were coming from when we started to build this up. Now, in Figma, down here, you have this like little option now. Whoops, that's the motion beta. So when I open that up and I select any frame that has a timeline associated with it, if I press spacebar, right, the animation then just unfurls there. So, you know, like initially when we start talking about this, we're like, oh, okay, could it be a separate product? You change modes. And ultimately, we wanted to design and animate in the same place, right? So any object that you see here can then be animated. And it works with this concept of nesting. Figma inherently works with this component-based system where you generate a component and then that component kind of moves on to the properties of that component can then move on, and then you could change and like update it or override certain aspects of it. So all of these here, every single one of these frames has their own timeline and time frame. So I've been using this tool for the better part of the year. I've been working with companies such as Atlassian, Google, EA Games, right, to further kind of refine and kind of figure out what is this like look and feel for a tool. Even here too, so where this is not yet in for everybody, but like introducing this concept of 3D transforms in Figma and being able to just go frame by frame in a web browser and kind of deliver this type of stuff. And I'm going to show you just a little bit of my thinking around that, and then also how I approach it. So back in the day, you used to make these like prototypes in Figma. I'm gonna go back into normal design mode. This is actually my cat right here. So when you're in prototype mode, you would create these associations. And we had this way to animate that was between two frames. It was just smart animate. It would look at a ball over here, a ball over there, you click and it makes it bigger, but you didn't really have a lot of control. So just as like a starting point, I'm gonna show you something. When we were developing video prototyping, I was working closely with the team then, and I would just make tons and tons of video prototypes to kind of like show and sell before we had anything available. So here I'm going to show you this. Hopefully it doesn't, yeah, it's not going to play loud. It's just going to be on mine. So one of the first things I got when we got video prototyping, it was in the midst of the pandemic, so like everybody was like really kind of like watching this. So this is one of the first things that I made. Let's see. It's a little bit, you know, the internet's not so great here, but what's cool about this is that as I'm navigating, right, there's this like association of how this works, right? And so in Figma, this kind of stuff is possible. And like I said, I would gain sort of equity at the company by just trying to like make as many wild things as I can. So this is one of the more conservative ones that I had. But when we had interactive components is largely meant for design system heads. But I took it in like different ways. So for interactive components, you know, I would make like little games. And this is what I mean by prototyping with play. I often would default to something that somebody else wouldn't typically try, right? So the examples that I make aren't necessarily what someone would consider, you know, the thing that you would normally do. And so when we're pitching these to companies, I'm showing them like just really whacked out examples to try to inspire other people's ideas, right? Because it's too easy to say, here's a button, right? Okay, there's the button. They're like, great, I can make the button this way. But I want to kind of charge their ideas into new ways of thinking, right? And so when you think about anybody here, like, you know, designing like Photoshop back in the day, and remember when you didn't have transparent PNGs and then you had to like round corners, wasn't just a border radius, and so you actually had to make a little transparent PNG and put it in, right? So back in that era in Photoshop, you could really drive the innovation of what the web was doing because there was these things that weren't yet possible. And I feel like even now, there is this drive to, oh, everything should be exactly as it is in HTML, right? And it's like, why are we constraining ourselves to such things when we could still kind of push the technology further? So oftentimes the critique of Figma is that not everything maps one-to-one to the web, but I firmly believe that it shouldn't. Like, we should make our tools push the technology. They should try to drive the innovation of one another. And that's why I make weird stuff, right? So I'm gonna show you like a quick demo of a concept. And like I said, like, I like to just kind of break things. This is an example. So I used to be a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I would have students just kind of give me all kinds of weird requests. Like little problems that they would like to solve. So once again, thinking of those curiosities, I took a look at the concept of an aperture or like a shutter animation, and I was like, how would I perform that in Figma, right? Because how I would do it in Figma can then inform how might I do this on the web, or how might I construct that in CSS. Right? There might not necessarily just be a one-stop solution for accomplishing that, but Figma becomes this kind of like problem-solving tool, and I'm going to show you just kind of how I approach that. So, Figma demo time. In Figma, if I look down here, right, I have a bunch of different shapes. I'm going to pull up the polygon tool. I'm going to draw out this triangle. And first of all, I'm going to ask anybody, does anybody know why there's a little extra bit of space at the bottom of that triangle? Anybody know why that's there? Just a show of hands? No. You know why that's there because I've taught in your class, right?
That's right, yeah.
All right, cool. And you also follow me on Twitter.
Yes.
I'm going to take a wild guess.
Yeah.
Just to give you more room if you want to like adjust the shape, like click on it and like.
That is part of it. All right, so actually I have a whole, I have in my discarded slide pile, I have a whole thing here, right? There's actually tons of designers that are just like, why is this? And like, Figma's wrong. And like, you know, the biggest mystery in design is why Figma Triangles has this extra space at the bottom. And then actually a lot of people are like, oh, it's optical alignment. It's not mathematical alignment. And they have all of these things. And this is effectively one of my curiosities. So I'm actually going to head back over to interactive components. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I promise we're going to get there together, and you're going to learn something right now. The reason that exists, and you are kind of correct in that I'm able to create additional polygons, but the reason that exists is that it keeps the center of the triangle, the centroid, it's known as the physics center, right? It's a math calculated center to allow you to center that triangle for play buttons, right? So if I were to put this on the side, if I was to take that triangle, I have another triangle over here. If I flatten that out, right? Let's say I draw a circle behind it. So I'm going to draw a circle behind this. Let's go ahead and make that circle black and then make that a little bit bigger, right? And then I come over here and then I go like this. If I was to center this up and I was to center this up, right? Notice how the option with the additional space is better than the option that just frames it to the edges. And then people will misattribute this as optical spacing. While it does seem optically balanced, it's actually mathematical spacing because it's applying the centroid. It's applying the center of mass of that object. So whenever you are aligning icons, whenever you are aligning shapes, you know, as a designer, you need to not only think about, you know, like how that's placed, but you need to think about that centroid. So this is why I do these experiments. This is why I do that research. This is why I'll like sit there and think like, okay, why is this there? So here too, you'll notice that as I add those additional points, right, like it allows me to censor all those various polygons within that circle because Figma is an interface design tool and you're going to make a lot of play buttons. And if you have to manually adjust that time and time again, it's going to be very annoying. So that being said, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a triangle, and what I want to do, I want to flatten it. I actually don't want that extra space. That's kind of funny. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to create this as a component. I'm going to take that component. I'm going to option drag that. I'm going to rotate that. I'm going to snap this down. I'm going to duplicate that one more time with Command D and then duplicate again. And then I'm going to select all of that. I'm going to put that into another component. And the reason why is this is how I get an aperture. right? And so I can go to this object here, I can apply a stroke and make that a little bit bigger. Let's make that white. Let's even take that fill, darken it up a little bit, right? And then I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm starting to get there, right? Then what I would do is I would take both of those objects, I combine them as variants, I draw a new frame, I drop the instance of that right into there, and now I can mask this out. So I'm gonna press the O key, I'm gonna draw out a mask, I'm gonna make that green, and then I'm gonna align and send that to the back. I'm gonna select both of those objects and I'm gonna use that as a mask. So then now, as I adjust this, right, I can begin to make this like little aperture. So Figma, like I said, is a problem solving tool. It helps me figure these things out. And then with prototyping, what I can do is I can call this aperture. I can select both of them. I could duplicate that, right? I'm going to use the fact that both of these are named the exact same thing, and then I'm going to make an adjustment on this. And then because I have these two states where all of the hierarchy of those layers are named the same, I can then go into prototype mode and create a simple interaction where I can on-click, oops, trying to get my keyboard shortcuts right. There we go. I can on-click, navigate to the other one, and here I'm going to do a smart animation. So I'm going to ease in and out 300 milliseconds. That's looking great. I'm going to go ahead, drop that back. All those properties are the same, and let's see what that looks like. Hopefully it works. So there we go. So I was able to generate that. And so this is the way that like I would think about like Figma. I would make all these like little tests over and over and over again. Well, a lot of people are sitting there, you know, making all of their buttons over and over again. I like to just kind of explore in different ways. And what's always interesting to me is the results that I can yield. So that leads me to making rotational symmetric astronaut interactions. This, I think the interaction kind of broke, but that's okay. And then that led me to my spider walk cycle. And I promise this is also very important. So since Figma came out with interactive components, and since its animation tools were so limited, I was kind of obsessed, sorry if this is freaking anybody out. I became obsessed with, you know, how to create these complex animations, right? I wanted to push the tool further, and because I became famous for doing these explorations, and a lot of that impacted the product, right? So things that I needed here was I needed, you know, better pivot points for rotation. I didn't want everything to just rotate on the sensor. You know, I needed the ability to have a timeline to move things through. You know, I needed better tooling in Figma, so, you know, I'm constantly at everybody, to everybody's annoyance, you know, asking for these things. And then as such, we began to work on Figma Motion. I kind of showed that. And as we were working on Figma Motion, you know, all these little experiments and things kind of became our approach. So if I click right here, I'll open up Motion and I hit the space bar, you know, you could see some of these animations that I made. And not all of them, I would say maybe just that little dial, like that's actual product. But for me, it was more about creative expression and seeing what I could really do with that. So in this first, we have this concept of a trim path. So a trim path is kind of like a motion stroke. It's a concept that's in animated SVGs, so it's something that can map directly to code. I wanted to see how I could push that. This particular example I began using, we have this tool called Figma Draw, where you can create custom brushes. About half of those default brushes are brushes that I made. I'm just gonna throw that out there because I'm really proud of them. And so, you know, not only do we have trim path, I'm like, first thing I do, okay, what if I throw like a crazy brush on that trim path, right? So what that means is when I come here and I am adjusting the stroke, you know, this crazy brush, if I change it, you know, will it still work, right? And my crazy experiments then also become, you know, like, am I testing, am I pushing this product enough to do the weird things that people may want it to do. Right here, this example is a clear example of what we had was a tool that allowed, I'll show you right quick. We had this tool right here. So if I pull this up and I press Option R when I'm in design mode, right, we get this little pivot point, and then that pivot point allows you to rotate things, right? And to me, that was amazing, but it's so hidden. There was no way in the UI to map that out. But with motion, when I open up motion and I select an object here, we now have UI for that pivot point, which is like an anchor point, which is a concept that is very important. So we're getting better at surfacing those things and seeing what that looks like, being able to animate that with keyframes. Right, this right here is just me pushing this concept of the trim path a little bit further. And I'll show you what I'm doing here, what got me to even think about beginning to mess around with this concept. I used to do these things called vector speed runs, right? Where you make an icon and you try to do it as fast as you can do it, like humanly imaginable. And I would basically just recreate the infinity symbol over and over and over again and try to find the best way to do it. Once again, Figma as problem-solving application. I'm going to show you the fastest way that I've made a infinity symbol. So I'm going to begin by drawing out a rectangle. I'm going to press Shift X. It's going to swap the fill and the stroke. I'm going to expand that stroke so it's centered here, right? I'm going to bring the radius all the way down. And actually, I want to make sure that that is a square, so like a perfect square. So I'm going to make it a perfect square. R key, perfect square, Shift X, big stroke. It's in the center, right? We're going to pull out that radius. And so the radius looks like a circle, right? And you're just like, if you blink, you're going to miss it. But I press Shift V, and then I now have a infinity symbol. And I showed this. Tim Van Dam is like our icon designer. He's like a famous designer on the internets. Really brilliant guy. And I showed him this, and he was just like, "What?" And then he was like, "Wait, I got to see that again." So you could even do it this way too. So I press Shift H, right, and it just swaps that point. And it gives you this kind of like infinity symbol. And then like through those explorations, I also found a way to create 1-point shapes in Figma. So you might even be asking, what does that mean? Let's see if I could even do it still. I haven't done this in a while. And what that means is I can create, let's see. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I have to draw it in like a slightly different way. Let's see if I can remember how to do this, because like this is something I'm trying to off the cuff at this point. Yeah, here. Let's do this. I'm gonna swap that, right? And then I'm going to flatten that. So now it's flattened. And then I have this kind of like center point, right? See how we got that center point? And then I can delete those, and then I can delete those, and I have a 1-point graphic in Figma. And you're just like, what is even going on? How do you figure this stuff out? And this is how I prototype, right? This is how I play. This is how I push concepts and to try to think of things in a different way. I do them over and over again. I look for different avenues, and I try to push that. And as such, you know, that is going to get me to try different things. So what I'm doing here is I'm applying trim path to several different objects, and I'm just modifying their in and out points. I'm going to show you how to animate that right now. So here, once again, let me go back to where I had, I'm actually just going to use Figma Draw. I'm going to come right here. This is the next segment. So this is motion. This was shown at the keynote. And what I'm doing is I'm animating 2 points. And the way to do that, I'm going to press the F key. I'm going to draw out a frame. I'm going to head on over to Figma Draw. And then here in Figma Draw, I am going to pull out Melodrama. Melodrama is a brush that I designed. I love it. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to increase the width of that stroke, and I'm going to draw something that looks like that, right? And it's all one single stroke. Now, when I go and open up the motion editor with that object selected, you have these points over here, right? You have these keyframes. So you have path trim start and path trim end. And what they represent is where's that end point and where is that beginning point. So when I create a keyframe here on the timeline, there's the end point. I'm gonna move that over to 1,000 milliseconds. If I want it to be seconds, I can click here. Now it's just seconds. Here in that first frame, I'm just gonna set that endpoint to 0, and now it draws in. If I wanted to go slower, I could just extend the duration by which it is animating, and then I can watch that play out. And now what I want to do is, if I want to have it then sort of animate away, I can modify the endpoint. So I can come over here, I can click that endpoint, and then I'm going to move this over, and we're going to set that endpoint then to 100, and it's basically going to animate out. So there we go, comes in, and it animates out. Now, let's say this little part right here is kind of undesirable, right? Like I'm not feeling that as much, right? You see how it's using that stretch brush doesn't look as good. This has been a common complaint in Figma, that folks haven't had the ability to animate stroke width values. So I can come over here, I can click that stroke width at 48. I'm gonna come over here and bring this all the way down to 0. And now you'll see that as it's animating, I'm also changing its size, and then I can move that anywhere that I want. So then now it has more of a nice transition. I can copy those keyframes. Anybody that was in Flash previously, I guarantee you, you're just gonna like love this, right? And then I can animate out. What was amazing was when I got to present this at Config, I was in, I had like a learning lab, and there were former students of mine. I remember I got a former student right here. There were former students of mine in that room who I taught Flash to, right? Back in like 2006. And they were in that room. Like they now work at like Google and Pinterest and stuff like that. And I'm showing them. I was like, you told me when you like graduate, like when am I ever going to use this now that the iPhone is a thing and Steve Jobs doesn't like Flash? And I'm like, look, we're back at it. We're full circle. It matters again. So here you can kind of create these animations. And what's cool is like any kind of property that generates these keyframes, you can then animate as well. So let's dig in a little bit further. We now have this concept known as shaders in Figma. A shader is any kind of effect. You can prompt the shader using the agent. So I can come over here to the agent, and this is like an AI-driven tool. In the current period, we're not charging for anybody, we're not charging for AI credits for anybody to generate shaders or tools or effects. So like, take the use of it now, because once you generate a shader, it's just yours, right? You just get to have it. It doesn't use additional AI credits. And it's actually one of my methodologies for using AI is like, can it exist without further using AI, right? And that judges whether or not I use something. Yes?
Can you share those with other people?
Yes. And I'm actually gonna show you how you share it. It's freaking cool. So these are shaders, and there's two types. There's shader fills, and there's shader effects, right? So a shader effect is anything that can affect anything inside of the frame. So right here, you see I have like a noise displacement, and then I have a color separation. Right here, I have a lens effect, and this lens effect, as this is animating, I'm gonna show you really quick, this lens distortion that I have right here. As this is animating, I can actually modify the lens distortion in real time, right? And first off, other animation tools, After Effects, you could imagine using that other animation tool. You need a separate composition, you need to load it up, you need to go to the effects panel, you need to explicitly set those properties, you need to do all this. Here, I can just start making stuff. If I need to riff on this concept, right? If I need to change it up, you know, I could just come in here and then, you know, begin to change colors and looks of it. So let's say this is animating here. I can do that lens distortion. I could just turn it off, you know, and it's cheap. I can iterate more quickly. I'll show you quickly how to set up that, and we'll set up our like a little shader of some sort. So let's say here I'm gonna draw a frame. I'm going to draw a circle inside of this frame. Let's just make it black. And I'm going to say on this frame, make a shader effect that is like a 3D glasses anaglyph. You start learning all of this new language when you're like creating shaders. You're saying anaglyph, you're saying moire effect and things like that, like a 3D glasses anaglyph effect. You go to shaders.figma.com, you can start learning some of that language, and you can see a bunch of examples. So while that's going and marinating on that frame, I'm going to show you, these are some of the built-in ones. So I'm going to show you exactly where to find some of the built-in ones and how to use them. And what's cool is that every single property that is prompted into a shader is then keyframeable. So if I come over here, right, let's say I just have like a normal like layer, right? And I click on its fill. Over here, I can create a shader fill. I'm going to choose this nebula filter. And you might be like, why would I ever use a nebula filter? And I'm like, because it's freaking cool. So when I come over here to this nebula filter, there's all of these properties. All of these properties have keyframes. I'm going to go to travel. I'm going to click that first keyframe for travel. I'm going to move it over to the beginning of my timeline. And then I'm going to drag all the way over here. And then I'm going to move travel all the way up. And then I'm going to take the end of my timeline and put it there. And then we're going to travel through space. Right? Let's say I want to change the ease of that. I select that mid frame. I come over here. Many of you who've ever animated before be like, you never use linear animation. Linear animation is good for constant motion. Right? It has a purpose. It has a place. Right? So there we go. I am now animating through time. Imagine having to do that manually. Right? And so even here, I can go into this nebula shader and I can increase the star density. I can decrease the star density. Right? I am in a web-based browser tool, you know, with frames that have also a bunch of animation. I'm still able to accomplish this. Let's randomize that a little bit, and then I could even change the sensor. So let's change how we're traveling. So that's a fill effect. Let's see. Oh, did it? Here we go. It's asking us a question. Which parameters should this effect expose? Let's say separation, angle, edge, and submit. Because it's, you know, it's asking you what are the properties that you want to animate. You can also say, like, I want these other properties, not just animate, but just control. So as you begin to generate these sorts of things, you could even change those parameters. You could say, I want more drastic controls. I want to tighten the controls. I want to set the value from 0 to 1. One thing that I actually use often, I use this offset parameter to help me create perfect loops. So this is a shader fill that I built that went native into Figma, so you can find it in the shader fill menu. And I created this offset value that allows it to just have this permanent animation. And so all I'm doing here is I am animating this value of this concentric shape from, right here, this offset from 0 to 1, right? So when I hit play, you see that it's just animating that. Ignore my emojis. It's just animating from 0 to 1, right? And so that's the cool thing. It's like, okay, you got all these complex things. Within this complexity, you can sort of build in your own simplicity. You can make it a little bit more simple for yourself. All right, is this still bacon? That's still bacon. I need to wrap the code. All right, it's gonna wrap the code. Within Figma 2, you now have this capability with animation or with the agent to build out your own tools in Figma. So we have shader effects, shader fills. A fill is a fill on a layer like the stars. A shader effect is like the anaglyph thing that we're building here, or the lens distortion. And I'll show you another really cool one in just a moment. But you can start to build your own tools in Figma. So like a plugin that you prompt. So I'm going to show you a plugin that I prompted. This is called Timeline Stagger. Because I animate a lot, I couldn't wait for the motion team to build out every tool that I wanted. So I built out this tool called Timeline Stagger. And what it does is if I look at this existing timeline, all of these objects animated at the same time. That's boring. So what I do is I collapse these layers, I press Command A, and I use this Timeline Stagger plugin that I built, and I prompted it. I'm like, give me the ability to stagger my tools, give me an easing curve so I can control how it staggers. So let's say if I'm just going to apply a linear placement of my layers, I can apply a stagger. There they are, they're staggered, and then that's what it looks like. Right? Then I could say, wait, let's reset that. I want to go censor out, right? And then apply stagger. And I'm like, wait, screw that. I want to be a little bit more artsy about this. Let's get like a nice ease in out. Let me reset and apply a stagger. Let's go top to bottom and ease in and out, and then apply stagger. So now you can see how I'm typing those out. So this was a tool. I had the idea. I go to the agent. I say, make me a plugin that does this effect, and then I'm able to generate it. You can then further refine it as you click here, and then I can say, okay, edit timeline stagger. You can build this tool and then further it out. It carries through with files. So if you share a file with a customer, this plugin then lives in that file, and we're gonna make it so it can be shared in the community as well. You have a question in the back.
Can you randomize that so that it's not linear or?
Oh yeah, you could say randomize. So I can go in, I would edit the thing, and I would say, give me a random function for this as well. There's one that we built in there, it's called a bento tool. So it's a bento builder, you select a bunch of objects, you could click randomize, and it'll randomize the layout. You can also ask it for a seed value. A seed value for the randomization will give you an expected result with that seed value. So then this way you can kind of get like an expected randomization. So prompting it and asking for that seed value will give you a nice result. You will see that within the nebula shader effect, there is this seed, and then that seed helps you get a repeatable outcome even though there's a degree of variability within it. So learning all kinds of concepts today. I'm going to kind of close this out. I'm going to show you a little bit more of my process and some of the things that I built. So even as I was presenting to the executives at Figma to kind of defend the motion team and the tools that they were building, I just made weird shit. So I'm like, okay, Figma is this really awesome tool where you can do things like duplicate and rotate. So duplicate, rotate, stagger, right? I got these little shoes. Then I have let me nest them inside of a container, right? So I animate the thing, and then I put it inside of another frame, and I animate that in and out. This is what that looks like without the fill hidden. And then I can put it together and treat that container almost like a camera in how I animate and move it, right? Once again, very cheap operations. If I hit Command Y, you'll see. So I basically take that frame, and then I just kind of zoom it out. So these concepts are really interesting. I began creating this sort of proof of concept with nesting, where I take an anchor point rotation, I then nest the frame into the other one here. So if we take a look at this frame, I just have a duder inside of a duder. I call these little guys duders. And then the third one, right? So just the same animation nested inside of another frame and inside of another frame. You know, expanding my curiosity. So now I'm duplicating and rotating, and then I nest into another frame. And if I Command Y, you can kind of see how that plays out. And so this simple concept became like my North Star. I was like, y'all gotta get nesting right. And then it turned into me making a little jellyfish. So this jellyfish, as I continue to build it, right, I have like trim path animation, I got the nested frames, right? I'm animating properties such as the width and height and scale and position all at the same time. And I was like, if you could do this, then it's gonna be great for interfaces. That then led to me doing some weird spiders. Then I throw shaders on my spiders. This is a 3D inflate shader. So this shader has a lot of different properties, so I could actually inflate that all the way out. Once again, I'm in a web-based tool, right? If I need to hide that, it's non-destructive. I can just apply that there. I even have a color adjustment shader. Let's go take a look at our existing shader that's up here. Let's see what it looks like. Did it finish? We're gonna go to the agent. Let's see. All right, let's apply the effect. So it's applying the effect. There we go. And then I got my separation and I got my angle. So now that I have this anaglyph shader, I can copy it and I can add it to my frame here. And I just made the shader, I prompted the shader, and then I can continue to edit it and like adjust how it's creating. So I'm stacking the shaders on top of one another. Then I'm gonna close this out by showing you my little spider component. So I took the last spider and I was like, that was kind of boring. Let me make it a real spider. Once again, coming back to the spider walk cycles, right? So I got this making it look a little bit more creepy crawly. Once again, I apologize to anybody who gets skeeved out by that sort of thing. You know, then I'm basically taking that nested frame and I'm moving that nested frame. And then I made it a whole march of little spiders. Right, so it's like I take the concept and I build complexity from simplicity. The concept of that single nested frame, you know, then more shaders. And by the way, this can be exported out as MP4, as GIF, as animated SVG. You can use this as context with MCP to then push it out with AI. It's gonna get a little bit better with shader keyframes. Right now it's not 100% there, just in the way that it's exposed. But then I use this as like a learning concept, right? Like, what is a spider not but just two four-legged creatures stuck to each other? And then the one thing I did want to show you, somebody asked it here, like, how would I share this? It just exists in a file, it's just a frame. If I go to figma.com/@Miggy, right, you have your Figma profile. We have this new concept called riffs. It's kind of a feature that lets you share those riffs, share a frame from community. But what's cool is you as an individual can come to my riff, and if I made it available for share, you click copy frame. Let me actually do it on, here, I'll do it on this one, right? You can click copy frame, copy to clipboard, and then take that into your file, and it'll paste the shader, the animation, the graphics, all of it. So you can now share just a single frame of your design onto a Figma community profile. Somebody can come along, and we've created like a view source where you can not only just share that design, but someone can then learn from that concept and then build off of it. So I want to thank you all.
Where can you find that library?
I'm sorry?
Where can you find that library?
Which library?
That you can share, or people are sharing.
Oh, figma.com/community.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, figma.com/community. Yes.
So when you did that, one got pasted into a different document. Can you use the agent to then modify the things that were created on that one, or?
You can only modify the ones that you
Yeah,
create.
you create, okay.
Yeah,
So, but if you modify, does it affect everything downstream that people have copied and used off of that?
No.
Okay.
So like when you copy that frame, that's your frame now.
Okay.
When you copy that shader effect, it is technically their shader effect.
Yeah.
You can't riff upon it, but you can say, hey, I want an effect like this.
Like this.
Yeah. You could literally take an image of an effect, like a glitch effect, paste it into the agent and say, I want an effect that's similar to this, give me controls that do X, Y, and Z. It does take usually a few prompts to get something the way that you want to.
Because when you do a 3D one and you paste it on something else that you own, if you edit the original, does it affect the one that you?
Oh, it's just it's stacking.
Just stacking.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so it's just stacking. Think of it as like a blend mode.
Great.
So then if you rearrange it, you know, the other one
Yeah.
kind of moves on
But
top.
if you edit the original 3D, does it affect the second one that you pasted onto in your own file? Not, you know what I mean? Like.
Oh yeah, like if I make a change on this, it doesn't go back to the user, to
But
the
if,
author.
yeah.
Yeah, so here, I could take this anaglyph 3D and I can move it down. And then so now the inflate shader is impacting the anaglyph. So then if I move that up in that layer, now the shader is on top of the other one. So it's a stack order of what's affecting what. And then so in your file, if you go over to tools, you'll see what is essentially created by you, right? What is from Figma, right? And then like where things are actually from. When you paste something from somebody else, it might just live in the file. When you make something yourself, it exists across all of your files. Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you save it from here up to your profile?
Oh, that's a great question. So let's say if I wanted to share one, let's see here. All you need to do is go share. You're gonna say publish to community. No, hold on, I'm in the wrong account for that. Yeah, here, right? Let's see. I actually don't want to share this, but I might as well. Okay, so this is an illustration I made. Check that out. Look at all of those. This might be a bit heavy. Yeah, this might be a little bit too heavy. There we go. That's a heavy frame. Let me find something a little bit more lightweight. Yeah, so like this is where I've been sharing everything from. So if I was to just say, you know, like this, boop, right? I can go to share, share selected frames to community. And so this right now, it's in beta. So you can request access, you'll get access in like 24 hours, but it's gonna be available to everybody really soon. If I hit post, it's gonna get everything ready, it's gonna share it. So basically you select a frame, if you have a community profile set up, it'll share it and then you'll just see it on your profile. So if it has motion, it'll actually render it out as video first. You can download that video and then it actually shares that video, but it still maintains the original relationship to that frame. So I just shared that there, and then anybody can copy that frame. Any other questions? Yes?
One more. Never heard of Figma before today, but learning stuff. And pricing levels?
So pro team, it's per seat. So you basically get a team, and then I think it's like a pro team is like $16 a user a month, or $12 to $16 depending on your commitment. But then there's also an enterprise tier, which I think is like 45 users a month. So it's for like editors, and then you can have viewers or collaborators, which has like a little bit more limited access. So if they want to share whiteboard tools or the slides tool, they can do things like that. But like a full seat editor is like that. I normally get to sell the free version for education, so I don't actually know too much about the pricing tiers. Yeah.
Do you still do any education with RIT at all, or?
I occasionally do like workshops here and there. I primarily, as part of like my role, like I just go around other universities and I do talks for like students and maintain a campus leader program and educator board.
Okay.